welcome to this channel. We're going to go into part 2 of this presentation on the Black Danes and the melanated Vikings. And where's that quote? The quote on truth right here. Yes, here we go. Falsehood flies and the truth comes limping after it. Jonathan Swift right there, back in 1710. So while the first presentation on the Black Danes and Vikings was about, of course, the Danes, part 2, we're gonna go on about every other non-Danish Viking or piratical group right here. We're gonna talk about the originals. Now, it's definitely gonna show kind of a mixed population, but that's the point right there. We want to show that it wasn't all about just white pirates or anything of that nature. It also shows that these melanated non-Danes, they are indigenous to the area, to Scandinavia. So without further ado, let's get into this. Hey, but before we get into the meat or the heart of the presentation here with the truth, we're gonna go over some wishy-washy, unsure articles right here, so you guys know what to look out for when they try to slide this fabrication into history and make, in turn, historical fiction. So now here's a Seek Scandinavia article entitled "Did Black Vikings Ever Exist?" And it's from February 10th, 2022. And it reads, okay, people are fascinated by history, especially when the subject features seafaring warriors who pillages, plundered, and burned their way through numerous other cultures. Recent movies, books, and television shows depict Vikings as impressive and powerful. Most depictions also show them to be primarily light-skinned people with blonde, red, or sometimes brown hair. The idea of pure, light-skinned race of powerful, fearsome warriors has often been used within white supremacy groups, some of whom hold firm to the concept of, that Scandinavian people are the truest form of white humans, historically unsullied by different genetic influences. There is evidence to suggest, however, that some Vikings had darker skin and may have originated in Africa. The idea of Black Vikings has taken hold, and while groups may have a difference of opinion on what Vikings may have looked like, it seems clear that they were not a genetically homogeneous people. Okay, were there ever Black Vikings? While there is no historical evidence of a first-generation African choosing to join the Vikings, it is well established that the Vikings encountered Africans. This is likely to have resulted in them having children with at least some Scandinavians, as suggested by writings that discuss shorter, dark-skinned Scandinavians with dark eyes, dark hair, and broad faces. That is, while there are writings that detail tall, fair-skinned Scandinavians with light hair, alternative descriptions suggest that it is more than feasible for second and subsequent generations of Vikings to have had darker skin and hair than what we would typically expect from people from Northern Europe. It is important to keep in mind the assertion that being a Viking was more to do with embracing a way of life, that it was about descending from the same ancestral line. The word Viking, I'm sure that's the word Viking, is derived from the Scandinavian word for pirates, and pirates around the world are known to be more of a chosen tribe than a kinship group. Being a Viking, or at least being a Scandinavian who engaged in conquest and domination, also appears to have been a part-time job. Evidence points to the fact that many Vikings spent a significant portion of the year farming and creating family ties. They seem to have ventured out to pillage and plunder only from time to time and did not live a year-round pirate existence. It isn't uncommon for ancient Scandinavian literature to include descriptions of the skin and hair color of individuals. Interestingly, there do not seem to be written accounts of tensions between Scandinavians of different skin colors. Where did Black Vikings come from? One theory that could place Africans in Scandinavia holds that the origins of Scandinavian people came from the Nile Valley region and included taller Bantu Africans as well as Twa Africans, who were known to be short in stature. It's even been suggested that this supports the presence in Norse mythology of giants and elves. That is, as these Africans would have been significantly taller or shorter than others in the region. This theory points that this influenced subsequent storytelling at the time, with some of these people making their way into Norse mythology as giants. It's important to note that there were many explorers from African cultures who chose to set out in search of game, valuable goods to trade, and fertile land. Reaching Scandinavia from the coastlines of North Africa was not impossible, and in fact, many sea voyages of the time went considerably longer distances. Even Vikings themselves were known to travel as far as Afghanistan and Canada. Who was the first Black Viking? There is no historical account of the first Black Viking, but it is widely known that in the time of the Vikings, other cultures were also traveling and exploring. Historians believe that many dark-skinned people came to Scandinavia voluntarily and assimilated into the culture willingly. Some of those people may have chosen the Viking lifestyle. Others may have been brought to Scandinavia as slaves, then integrated into the culture over time, including signing on as Vikings. Being kidnapped and sold within the slave trade would have been an incredibly traumatic experience. So it is no wonder that some of the individuals who survived those trials and tribulations may have found it appealing to band with the stronger members of their new surroundings to regain some sense of power. It's never historically accurate to claim virtually anything as the first, especially when it comes to something as fragile and poorly preserved as human life. Even when researchers find skeletal remains that clearly show signs of genetic diversity among the Vikings, there's no way of knowing if those remains were indeed any form of first. Okay, what skin color were the Vikings? While most of the Vikings are believed to have had fair, peach-toned skin and light hair, there may also have been Vikings with darker skin. It is important to understand that when Vikings traveled to distant lands, they often brought back people from host cultures. There's no way to know for sure how many of these transplants arrived in Scandinavia by choice versus force. Vikings were known to engage in capturing and trading slaves. While many of those enslaved people were of European descent and had white skin, there's also evidence that some of them could have been of African descent. Okay. When it comes to references about Black Vikings, there's a lack of clarity. For example, it's assumed that some writings which focused on Black Vikings are referring to hair color instead of skin color. Numerous written accounts refers to individuals such as Halfdan the Black, who was the father of the King of Norway and the grandfather of two brothers, one called the White and the other the Black. Most historians believe that the majority of Vikings would have had fair skin and, well, light skin and hair, pale skin and light hair. However, that does not mean that there weren't significant numbers of mixed race or even African Vikings that fought and lived alongside their fairer warriors or paler warriors. Settlers have long been accredited with the sharing of genetic material. This occurred throughout the world and played a huge role in creating genetic diversity in those areas, in various areas. So while there very well be African genes in Scandinavian people, it can also be assumed there are Scandinavian genes present in people who remain living in African nations. Okay. What race were the Vikings? Thanks to advancements in DNA technology, we are now able to learn far more about the Vikings than we can glean from historical texts and artwork. An international group of researchers recently looked at DNA from more than 442 individuals known to live during the Viking era. They found that many Vikings have significant non-Scandinavian ancestry. This study was done on the remains that were found across Europe and in Greenland, which means they covered areas where Vikings were known to originate, as well as those where they were known to travel and settle. These remains were then compared to existing genetic sequences from thousands of modern individuals, as well as some from other ancient individuals. Based on this, we find the findings were that the Vikings and their ancestors would have intermingled often with people from Asia and Southern Europe. Researchers have also found the graves of individuals intentionally buried with Viking artifacts, like pieces from Viking chests, but who had none of the genetic markers of Scandinavian descent. This further underscores the idea of being a Viking was not necessarily tied to ancestry or kinship, but may have been largely a choice. Okay, did Vikings go to Africa? Historical evidence suggests that Vikings traveled to Africa, particularly northern Africa, in the mid-9th century. There are accounts of raids along the African coasts, including Morocco and Mauritania. Medieval Muslim writers speak of Viking raids that led to pillaging and the enslavement of locals, both for the purpose of collecting ransoms and or keep as slaves. In particular, Vikings were known to participate in slave markets and were not above selling other humans for profit. It can be assured that some of those slaves were eventually brought back to Scandinavia and may have become integrated into Viking culture. Who were the Black Danes? Some art depicts 8th century Vikings and Danes as black, with sledge carvings having been found of Nordic seafarers that appear to be of African descent. Historians also believe that there were more black people in Denmark than in other Scandinavian countries because of Denmark being located closer to the areas of Europe where black people were already living. This geographical aspect makes it easier for the people to reach Denmark, whether voluntarily or through the slave trade. There are also accounts of Vikings rounding up blue men for Gorm or Grum and black men Blaman in Spain and other areas. Once the Atlantic slave trade began to thrive, it's clear that Denmark engaged in actively sending tens of thousands of Africans to the Caribbean. As new archaeological evidence is discovered and genetic sequencing becomes even more precise, we may one day know more about the exact genetic identity of the Vikings. It seems, however, that sufficient evidence exists today to presume that there were a limited number of Vikings who derived from African bloodlines. Final thoughts on the history of Black Vikings. It is evident, based on historical records, including by non-Scandinavian sources, that the idea of all Vikings being pale-skinned and light-haired isn't accurate. On a superficial level, while many cite the name of Halfdan the Black as being indicative of Vikings having this skin color, this is actually referring to the color of his hair. Okay, more to the point, other sources make it clear that there were Black people in Scandinavia at this time, while far from the majority and many almost certainly not there by choice. It's inevitable that this would have led to there being at least some Black Vikings. Okay, as we all know, most TV shows and movies these days continue to show Vikings as the tall Scandinavian stereotype that you probably assume exists to this day. And while the majority of Vikings were likely to have been genetically Scandinavian, it's also historically accurate that trade, migration, and slavery had a clear impact on the genetic makeup of the region at that time. Accordingly, the idea of the tall, white, blonde Viking being the only image from that time simply doesn't hold up on the facts, as modern genetic research has confirmed. Okay, so now we're going to go into the ScandinaviaFacts.com article where they ask the question, were the Vikings Black? Get the facts. Okay, just like the last article, they're gonna mix truth with fiction and fabrication. Okay, that's the only way they can get these articles out. But now let's pick it apart and find the truth and then find the lies so that you know what to look out for. Okay, so they admit right there that the stereotypical image of the Viking of being white or light colored and straight blonde hair, brown hair, and let's add even red hair to it. That's the popular culture fictional depiction right there. Okay, so they say a small number of Vikings had black or brown skin, according to reliable historical evidence. Okay, so they say that for centuries, darker skinned people willingly traveled to Scandinavia or were forcibly taken there as slaves. Okay, and then some assimilated with the Vikings through farming, marriage, combat, and other cultural factors right there. Okay, so there were brown-skinned people among the Vikings. Vikings, they were known for being masterful sailors, ruthless fighters, and while most of them, they say, were white, not all of them were. Okay, so here's the truth. It's similarly inaccurate that they all had white or peach colored skin. Okay, ancient Scandinavia was permeated with myth, but that Swartish or melanated people weren't among the Vikings isn't one of them. Okay. And it says historical evidence shows that, Swarts or black people were a part of Viking culture, and that's what we're doing. Okay, brown skinned Vikings. Hold on, now here's a huge lie right here. Brown skinned Vikings didn't have Scandinavian ancestry. At least the first generation didn't, but through cultural assimilation, it's accurate to call them Vikings. Okay, man, pick that apart right there, man. The first generation, well, that's a little bit of truth, but it's kind of deceptive in a way, because well, on one hand, the first migration of people, the first peoples in Scandinavia was from the continent of Africa and the Near East right there. So on one hand, yeah, but many years later, I mean, if that applies to, if you're holding that standard in application to those people, why is that not being held to those people that came from Turkey, the Russian steppes, and the Aryan people? That's my point of contention right here. Why are you making them the standard of what it is to be Scandinavian when they weren't the first people in the area? Come on now. The first people in the area look like this sister right here, and then let's go, the first people look like this man right here. But you want to retain that African moniker on them when they're far removed from Africa or any tribes in Africa. They're watered down, So the only thing that's African about them, and that's why I say African type, is the phenotype right there, the outside appearance. But they developed so much that went counter to Africa. I mean, they're in a different land with different animals and vegetation. I mean, different weather. So I mean, they developed different customs. Different types of people came in, and I mean, different tribes came in, and they mixed with those tribes. And I mean, come on, let's be real about it. Okay, so where am I at now? Okay, there were brown skin. Okay, it says that okay, the sailors right there, and just like, again, I mentioned this in the other comments that I had on the other article, like the history of Ireland. It tells you about some African sea rovers, pirates, aka Vikings. They set up shop in Ireland, on the Irish coast, and they did business, man. Okay, there's even a poem written about these guys. Okay, so now let's go in. Okay, now it says brown skinned Vikings didn't have Scandinavian ancestry. Like I say, how? Come on, man. We already see, man. That's what this presentation is about. To show that quote right there, they didn't have Scandinavian ancestry. Yeah, that's false, man. Okay, so what is the evidence for black Vikings? Okay, they say that there's a book, A History of the Vikings, written by Gwen Jones. Okay, so in this book right here, she offers evidence of people with different racial profiles. Okay, between the neck of Jutland or Jutland and Lofoten's. Okay, she says that the two main types of Scandinavian have always been recognizable. The one tall of stature, fair or ruddy. Okay, light-haired, blue-eyed, longer face and skull. The other shorter, darker complexioned, brown or dark-haired, brown-eyed, broad-faced, and round of skull. Okay, now that ruddy right there, ruddy and sanguine, those are synonyms right there. They're not antonyms. Ruddy is not a scarlet color. The new definition makes ruddy scarlet, rosy cheeked, but the old established definition of ruddy is the exact same as sanguine. Sanguine is like a brownish, it can be like light sanguine, medium sanguine, even dark sanguine, but it all has that kind of like a reddish hue, but it's mostly brown. That's what it is. And then fair can be a tricky one too, because I mean, it's a lot of Creole people that's Negro still, but they have like a really pale complexion. You know, it's a chick on the news channel here. I want to say in Atlanta, Elise Edie or something like that. You know, she can be fair complected too. I mean, she's like whiter than a lot of these white people walking around. You know, white people, they get kind of reddish, but she's like, she got that. She retains that almost porcelain complexion. Let's move on. Okay, it says though light-skinned people were certainly the majority at the time, there were minority races who had brown skin tones. And at least they admit that, man. All right, skin color in ancient Scandinavian literature. Okay, so they got the Icelandic origin. Okay, don't read that. Okay, elsewhere, Jones gives examples of people with brown skin in ancient Scandinavian literature. He writes, okay, Harold Fairhair was the first king of all of Norway. His father was Halfdan the Black, Svarti, and two of his sons were likewise called Halfdan, one nicknamed the White, the other reminiscently the Black. Okay, so some historians like Jones note that the moniker the Black may be a reference to hair color. While this may be partially true, the implications likely refer to a person with a dark complexion as well. Okay. If the description exclusively referred to hair colors alone, it may raise questions about the son nicknamed the White. Yep. Jones gives another example from Scandinavian work called Egil's Cigar or whatever, man. Okay, we're gonna skip that one. You guys can pause the video on that and read it, but we're gonna skip it. Okay, how did black people get to Scandinavia? They migrated, man. Now, but look at the narrative they have to put up to get this story out. This article put out to the masses. As previously mentioned, the most common reason first generation black people fled there was as willing travelers. Okay, I'll give you that. Others were taken there as slaves. The second generation and beyond were born in the region, though their ancestry is elsewhere. Was elsewhere. Okay, so that doesn't apply to the white people there, huh? I mean, Turkish, Aryan, and Russian steppe region. That's where they migrated from, but that doesn't apply to them. Okay. Some black people willingly traveled to Scandinavia. Okay, it says dark-skinned people from northern Africa and certain places in southern Europe, like Spain, explored unknown areas, just like other Europeans and Asians who sought to discover what foreign lands were like. Okay, so it says that they fled there. Okay. So it says some black people were escaping to Europe, and some black people were taken to Scandinavia as slaves. Okay, that's what they say. That may have been true of some, but I mean, the originals, nah. Oh yeah, and this is another one right here. Okay, Jones writes that in Spain, the Vikings spent an unharassed week rounding up prisoners for ransom, though some probably black. They kept as souvenirs. What? What? Souvenirs of the voyage. Come on, man. Bro. These poor wretches, fur grum, blue men, black men, or merely men with dark skins, for the most part, ended up in Ireland. Okay. Come on, man. Fur grum. That sounds like Gorm, blue men, and then the black men. I mean, all this stuff is connected right there, man. Okay, and they didn't call themselves that. It's other people coming in. So, all right. So now it's talking about slavery eventually faded. So I mean, they couldn't put this article out without, injecting that slave narrative, servant narrative, and all the other nonsense. I mean, some of it probably happened, but you you're telling us that slavery happened for the bulk of the people that was originally there. You're not even mentioning, because the assumption is that, they're telling us the assumption right there: slavery, servitude, and then some of them came here from Africa, first generation, but they don't even talk about, like I say, the ancient Alpine race, the brunette races of Europe that were there pre-Aryan, pre-Russian steppe migration, pre-Turkish migration. So, you don't want to talk about that now, but it's okay. I will talk about it. So let's check this out right here. The Seek Scandinavia article, the Who Were the Black Danes portion right there. Notice how it says, I guess in the second paragraph right there, there are also accounts of Vikings rounding up blue men, fur grom, Grom, and black men, blaman in Spain and other areas. Once the Atlantic slave trade began to thrive, it's clear that Denmark engaged in actively sending tens of thousands of Africans to the Caribbean. Now, let's break this down right here. This first sentence right there, talking about Vikings rounding up blue men, fur grom. Well, we're gonna address that at the end of this presentation right there. But notice when I read the second, second article, it links up with this right here, and they tell you right now who they are. The blue men, that sounds like Gorm, right? But it's spelled Grom. And then the black man in Spain, of all places, man. Why so many brothers and melanated people in Spain? We're going to get to that in later presentations right there. But let's look at this lie or fabrication right here. Once the Atlantic slave trade began to thrive, they talking about Denmark engaged in actively sending tens of thousands of Africans. They call them Africans to the Caribbean, but nah, man, those were melanated European Danish people right there, swarthy Danish people that they were sending into slavery right there. That point will definitely be addressed in future presentations right there. Now let's check out the Were the Vikings Black article right here, and it tells you about Jones writes that Spain, okay, that part right there. Now check out below, it says that these poor wretches, fur grom, blue men, black men, or merely men with dark skins, for the most part ended up in Ireland. Okay, that's interesting, right? Now let's check out this interesting article that's online. People don't really talk about this stuff, but let's link it all together, pair it all together, and just bring it out. Okay, so now let's check out this theguardian.com article right here, and it's about the meaning of Bluetooth. So now we have the question: where does the computer term Bluetooth come from? Did they name the system after the Viking kings? And that's from Christian from Germany right there. Okay, first reply or response: my wife, who works as a naming consultant, tells me that it does come from a Viking king. The other obvious links from the name are blue from blue chip and tooth, as it is software which binds together various hardware, I believe. When coming up with the names for products and companies, firms have to bear in mind the fact that almost all words in the Oxford Dictionary have already been registered as domain names. Hence the recent trend toward historical names, Latin or the terrible made-up ones. Paul from New York, USA. The Ericsson website states that the technology is named after Harold Bluetooth, a Viking that promoted communication between Denmark and Norway. There is a statue of him outside Ericsson headquarters. Serena from the UK. Ericsson originally called their technology Bluetooth after Harald Bluetooth, who was king of Denmark between 940 and 981. During his rule, Denmark and Norway were Christianized and united, so Ericsson used the analogy that he allowed greater communication between people when naming their wireless communication protocol, Richard from Denmark. Okay, yes, apparently Bluetooth was a Danish king who was particularly good at getting people to work together, given that the Bluetooth wireless system is aimed at helping people use their phones and PCs, printers, and other gadgets. It was felt to be an appropriate name. Ian from the UK. Okay, I'm told that King Harald Bluetooth lived in Denmark between 910 and 940 AD, and his name had nothing to do with a Bluetooth. It means a dark complexion, which was unusual for Vikings. Not only did Harald not fit the classic image physically, he was a rather unusual Viking. The good King Harald brought Christianity to Scandinavia and also united Denmark and Norway. Similarly, modern Bluetooth technology unites separate computers, machines, and electronic gadgets. Jonathan from the UK. Most important is this: did Harald Bluetooth have blue teeth? If he did not, why was he so called? Alex from Hong Kong. Good question, Alex. Now we got the answer here. The name Bluetooth is the result of confusion between old Danish words and modern ones. Blah is the modern Danish word for blue, but once meant dark-skinned. Tan once meant great man and has been confused with tand, the modern Danish word for tooth. Richard Thompson from Denmark. Appreciate that, Richard. Now, Bluetooth was named after a 10th century king, Harald Bluetooth, king of Denmark and Norway, also known as Harald Bluetooth, Gormson of Harald I of Denmark. Bluetooth is an anglicized version of Harald Blåtand, who was known for his unification of previously warring tribes from Denmark, including now Swedish Scandinavia. John, appreciate that, from Manchester, UK. Okay, the last one. Bluetooth was the nickname of the chief design technologist whose teeth had a bluish cast due to the excessive amount of copper sulfate he brushed with. Yep, we used to call him Harald Bluetooth Mutter Stoltz from the UK. Now, let's go over this again right here. Now, I'm going to give credit to where credit's due. I first saw Malcolm from GMS use this source right here, so I had to save it and use it later. Okay, but now, yeah, I get to use this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go on and just get into the nitty gritty, so to speak. Go straight to the point. Okay, now, John Gardner of London, he said that basically the name Bluetooth had nothing to do with a Bluetooth. It means dark complexion, which was, okay, he says unusual for Vikings. You know, the original Vikings, not really, but okay, he set the tone right there. And then I like how this is set up. More important is this: did Harald Bluetooth have blue teeth? If he didn't, why was he so called? From Alex from Hong Kong. Now the two replies below, they drive the point home. He says, well, Richard Thompson of Denmark says that the name Bluetooth is a result of confusion between the old Danish words and modern ones. Blah is the modern Danish word for blue, but it once meant dark-skinned. Tan once meant great man and has been confused with tand, T-A-N-D, the modern Danish word for tooth. So I like what John Aga from Manchester, UK says. Bluetooth was named after a 10th century king, Harald Bluetooth, king of Denmark and Norway, also known as Harald Bluetooth Gormson and Harald I of Denmark. Bluetooth is an anglicized version of Harold Blanton, or Blatan, not Blanton, but Blatan, who was known for his unification of previously warring tribes from Denmark, now including Swedish Scandinavia. Now let's go back to what Richard said. The name Bluetooth is, really a result of confusion between old Danish words and newer modern ones. BLAA is the modern Danish word for blue, but it once meant dark skinned. So TAN once meant great man. So, put those two together. Blatan, you have dark skinned great man, or, black great man or something. So now look at what John says right here. He says Harold Bluetooth or Harold Blatan, because we know that Bluetooth is an anglicized version of Blatan. So, take that Blatan, dark skinned great man. So Harold, we're gonna put it all together and see if it sticks, over the modern day accepted meaning. Okay, so he said also known as Harold Bluetooth, or let's put in, instead of Harold Bluetooth, let's put Harold Blanton Gormson. So knowing what we know, what Gorm, Gorm, and Grom, Grom means, we know that was that meant the same thing as Moor and Dub, and there's other ones, Kiar and all of that. So Blatan, dark skinned great man, Gormson. So they're basically, it's a lot of color complexion terminology with these terms right here. Harold, dark skinned great man. Harold Blatan Gormson. So that's 3 right there. So just keep that in mind. And I'm definitely gonna put a link to this what is it? This the Guardian.com post on Bluetooth. And we're also gonna go over in ancient and modern Britons what Gorm means also, to tie it in. And then I'm probably gonna bring this back up in future presentations. But let's get back to the topic. That's some pretty interesting information, huh? Well, we're gonna go over one more source. I don't want to be too long-winded when I break this down, because I'm already at 50 minutes. So, Ancient and Modern Britons, Volume 1, page 313. I'm just gonna let you guys, I'm gonna skim over page 313. You guys can, pause the video and read it. But I'm really gonna go over page 314. And page 314 kind of breaks down that Gorm or Grom, and it mentions right here. I'm gonna read the full paragraph. Well, the first sentence right there, first full sentence, and it reads, as just suggested, it probably became fossilized at various dates in various races. Gorm the fierce old pagan Dane, who died in the year 935, and who was the ancestor of Sven and Canute of England, was likely suitably named, being presumably Gorm, the wool-colored man, just as his contemporary Dubville Nier of Scotland was the black man. Now, this will come up again. I'm definitely gonna go over Harold Blatan or Bluetooth again, and I'm definitely gonna link it again with Gorm and Dub and Niger and Moor and Maros and what else? It's some other ones. Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. But these things, they really stand up. whenever you decide to scrutinize the information, it holds up pretty well. So now let's go into the truth serum portion of this presentation right here, and we're going to go into the old reliable origin of the Anglo Saxon race, a study of the settlement of England and the tribal origin of the Old English people by Thomas William Shore and Louis Earl Shore. We're gonna check out page 106 right there, and keeping with the theme of the non-Danish Vikings, the other Scandinavian people, we're gonna just read a little bit on page 106, and it reads, "There is in addition evidence that points to Norwegians of a brunette appearance as another source whence brown complexioned people may have come into England." That's foreshadowing right there. I know. I'm definitely gonna read from this again when I resume my English series. Okay, continue reading. It says, "On the southeast coast of Norway and here and there on the coast farther north, a population is met with which differs from the usual Norwegian type, and this has been referred by anthropologists to a very ancient settlement there of the prehistoric brown race that survives in the highlands of Central Europe and is known as the brown alpine race. This race is believed to have extended before the dawn of history much further northwards in Germany. The brown people of Norway are well seen in Jotaren or Jotaren, where are both found the blonde and really dark-haired people about equally represented. The Norwegian brunettes differ from the typical blondes of that country in two other particulars." Page 109 and maybe 110 reads, "As regards the ancient brown race or races of North Europe, there can be no doubt of their existence in the southeast of Norway and in the east of Friesland. There can be no doubt about the important influence which the old Wendish race has had in the northeastern parts of Germany in transmitting to their descendants a more brunette complexion than prevails." You know what? I'm gonna skip that part, man. That's some foreshadowing though. But let's drop down to it. It would be as unreasonable to doubt this as it would to think that during the Norwegian immigration into England, all the brown people of Norway were precluded from leaving their country because they were brunettes, or that the Wends, who undoubtedly settled in England in considerable numbers, were none of them of a brunette type. So notice how they say that it would be as unreasonable to doubt this as it would be to think that during the Norwegian immigration into England. Now, all the brown people of Norway, they were called what? They say, they're asking a hypothetical, were precluded from leaving their country because they were brunettes. So now the brown complexion people, they're called brunettes or brunette type. We see that in this sentence alone right here. Brown people of Norway, because they were brunettes, brown. That's what, brown means brunette, brunette means brown. And then now brunette type. So when you see that brunette type or brunettes like that, they're talking about the complexion, the skin complexion. Brown people. It's not hair. So pages 112 and 113, that's more foreshadowing because I'm definitely going to use this in future presentations. But anyway, it says there's another old word used by the Anglo-Saxons to denote black or brown. Black, the word swart. The personal names Suart and Suert or Suart may have been derived from this word and may have originally denoted people of a dark brown, or black complexion. Then it says some names of this kind are mentioned in the Domesday record of Buckinghamshire and Lincolnshire. These may be of Scandinavian origin, for the eponame or nickname Svarti is found in the northern sagas. Halfdan the Black was the name of a king of Norway who died in 863. Okay, let's go on to page 113 right here. And okay, where it says what's kind of in the middle portion, green highlight, and it says the invasion of the coast of the British Isles by Vikings of a dark or black complexion rests on historical evidence which is too circumstantial to admit of doubt. In the Irish annals, the Black Vikings are called the Dub Genti or Black Gentiles. Page 114 reads, the Danes and Norse, having the general race characteristics of tall, fair, or pale or white men, must have been sharply distinguished in appearance from Vikings such as those of John Berg, for many of these were probably of a dark complexion. Now, the point of reading this portion right here is to show that both Fionn and Dub, or white and black races, were in the Scandinavian peninsula at that time. We already know about the Danes. The Danes were highly melanated, and then the Norwegians were mixed. You had black, white, and mixed in Norway, even at that time. Page 118 at the top reads, from what has been said of the presence of broad-headed people of a brunette type in parts of Norway, among the much more numerous long-headed people of a fair, pale, or white complexion who form the bulk of the Norwegian nation, it will be seen that the facts point to an early broad-headed brown race, some of whom settled on the Norwegian coast. The long-headed fair or pale or white race of the typical Norse variety, having perhaps subsequently conquered them. In any case, we find evidence sufficient to justify the inference that probably the early broad-headed people were brown. The same result is obtained by the study of the broad-headed people of Central Europe at the present day, the descendants presumably of the old Alpine brown race. The same evidence is afforded by the remnant of the Wends, whose skulls are broad and whose complexions are more or less brown at the present day, notwithstanding their fusion with the Germans. Okay, so to conclude this video, I have several points that I wanted to go over. So the first point is the ancient Alpine brown race, or races. They were in Europe first. They were in Scandinavia first. Migration and settlement by, they could say fair complexion, but it's white complexion people that we know as white people today. They migrated and settled into the area, and really they became more numerous than the ancient Alpine brown races. No doubt intermarriage and intermingling was going on, just like in the the Irish video right there about the Baron. These people from Turkey and the Russian steppes, they migrated to Scandinavia first before going to Ireland. So no doubt there were ancient brown Alpine brown races. There were the people that became known as, the Norwegians after the brown Alpine races. but they became more numerous, but then they intermarried, and you know, you got some mixed people walking around too. No doubt, a lot of mixed people. So that's the points that I established. I think I did a good job of establishing that, showing sources, some pretty credible sources. So regarding part 3, well, I don't think I'm gonna make an official part 3. You will see part 3 in other videos. You know, when I mention Vikings and other videos, probably like Viking raids and everything, then that'll be the part 3 when I touch on these Vikings right there. Then that information, you know, I'm just gonna break it up, and it's gonna be like a collaboration. It may be a Vikings and information on the Vikings on a France presentation, or information on the Vikings more than likely when I resume with the UK presentations. So that's about it right there. See you guys later.